All right, well, it is 12:01, so I am going to go ahead and begin. So welcome, everybody. This is the monthly session. We call it Advance out of the Office of Faculty Affairs. My name is Emily Green, and I am the Associate Vice Provost for Faculty Development within the Office of Faculty Affairs. And I'm really pleased to see you all, and our numbers are going up even as I speak. We had a really robust response to this one, so I'm very excited. Before we get to today's session, I do want to just give a little bit of a shout out to our next session, which is taking place on April 25th, also at noon, also a virtual session. And I can actually see that the speaker that we are going to highlight next month is on the call. So Justine Pinsky is going to be doing a session on scholarly writing. So it is called From Stuck to Submitted: Actionable Tips for Writing Success. So we are sticking with our theme of scholarship and scholarly writing, and what do we do with our data? And I'm very, very excited to have some folks from our library here. And I want to introduce Sally Gore, who's the Manager of Research and Scholarly Communication Services at the library. One of my goals is to highlight all of the different resources, services, support that is available to faculty across the UMass Chan system. And the library is absolutely a source of many of those things. So Sally, I'm going to have you go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks everyone for being here this afternoon. As Emily said, my name is Sally Gore, and I work in the library. I've been there for a good number of years now, so I may know some of you, or you may know me. And I do hope that you this workshop will just give a little tickler reminder again of some of the tiny bit of things that we offer out of the library in terms of services and resources and expertise of our professional staff. So I do want to highlight that. So Emily came to the library several months back now, and we sort of went over some of the different things that we do in instruction and just one-on-one sessions and workshops and whatnot. And this was one of the ideas that she thought would be interesting. And so we're going to go ahead and see how it goes. See what we do. So basically, a few things that I hope you'll come away with the session at the end of the session is to just understand some basic principles of design that you can apply not only to visuals or to data visualization, but to any sorts of graphics that you're doing, or any kind of handouts and presentations and any sorts of things that design principles come into play. I'm going to give you 5 really quick, simple tricks to do to make your charts more and graphs more effective. Discuss what a visual abstract is, because this was a request to kind of talk about visual abstracts and their growing popularity in publications and in social media. We'll talk about some of the components of that, and then we'll describe all kinds of ideas for how to use charts, graphs, and visual abstracts to disseminate your science. One second, I knew my dog was going to hear me talk, and let me just give him something to entertain himself for a while. There he is. I was prepared. So let's talk a little bit to begin about some of the basic principles of design. Andy Kirk is a very well-known data visualization person out of the UK, and this is one of his books that I really like a lot. And in his description of just doing data visualization in general, he says that visualization is in and of itself just a series of making decisions, a game of decisions. And to make good decisions, you have to be aware of all the different options that you have available to yourself, both in terms of the tools that you have available and the skill set that you have available to yourself. And sometimes just the other people that you can have do things for you rather than do them yourself. And to realize wherever your limitations are there, to sort of pick and choose how to close those gaps, if it will be help make your work more relevant, or help you be able to do what it is that you want to do with creating data visualization in particular, but any kind of visuals that we're going to talk about. Oops, I went a little ahead here on my thing. Let's go there. So in general, when we look at designing anything, it's almost like you go back to the basics of journalism 101, or however we started to write stories way back when we started doing that. And you think about the who, the what, the when, the why, and the how of what it is you're designing, be it, I don't even, we're talking here about more abstract sort of visual things, but if you think about design in general, even designing furniture, designing utilities, designing anything, we take all of these aspects into consideration. So when you're thinking about data in particular or visualizations, what's the story that you're there to tell? What have you been asked to tell, right? What are the questions that you're trying to answer when someone comes to you and asks you to, do a project in this or you have a project in mind, or you're working with other people? What is it? What's the question you're trying to get at? Much in the same way as what would your research question be, or whatever along those lines. What are the key points that you're trying to make? Because visuals, as we know, sort of complement the words that are there. So what are the things that the visuals itself will really highlight in the context of the rest of your words? Who's the audience that you're presenting to? Are you doing a class? Are you doing a course for students here? Are you doing, are you speaking to, the provost or faculty council? Or are you speaking to policymakers to do a change? For physicians, are you speaking to patients, or are you talking to your peers? So these things all come into play and should be thought about when we are preparing or thinking about the kind of visuals that we want to use. A lot of times time frame comes in particular with data. People ask a question, and to be able to hone it down into a particular time period is really very helpful. Why are you showing a visual in the first place is really always a good question to ask, because sometimes we just jump right in. We've got some data, let's make a fun chart really quickly. And it's always good to sort of think why you're doing that in the first place, and how to do it. What's the best way to present the information that you're trying to get across to your audience? So this brings us to starting to the second step in the process, which is just to start thinking visually. And along these lines, I'm going to cover a few things that some are, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's pretty common sense, but it's always good to have a refresher, right? So some of the basic, and these are really in particular to graphic design, but again, come into play with lots of things. So when we think about contrast, we use contrast, of course, to highlight the difference between two different things or three different things or whatever, to make the most important things stand out. We use contrast. It works really well for that. We use balance in two different ways, sometimes to show symmetry between things and how they all align, and sometimes actually to show asymmetry, so that you could have things a little off-center to show that principle in your work. We use proportion a lot, of course, to show how things are related to one another. It's the size of things relative to one in design. Larger things are generally viewed as more important than smaller things. Though there are oftentimes, as we know, some really important things hidden in small ways. So if you ever think about small text, and people put that fine print at the bottom, sometimes there are really crucial things that are hiding there that the font size in particular, in that case, is being used sort of the opposite direction, not to more to hide the more important things than that. But it's to make the reader's eye stand out better than others. In the same way, we use hierarchy, which often dictates that the more important things should stand out. Sometimes we use size. You can see here the lines vary in thickness when I'm trying to show hierarchy. Sometimes we use color. In this case, the red stands out more than the blue. And other times we use hierarchy in the sense of position. The top is more important than the bottom. You think of that all the time when you're designing web pages and you think what's the first things that you see above the scrolling thing, or back in when people actually had newspapers, what was above the fold, those sorts of principles. We repeat elements to sort of reinforce ideas. We think of font size when we're aligning things up. We tend to use the same fonts to show headings for each thing, the same fonts, or the same, we use bold for each heading to highlight in that way. We use the same size of things, the same color for elements that are similar. And you could even, if you just notice these slides, I'm using repetition in this little set of slides to kind of just repeat. These are all graphic design principles, and I'm using the same sort of pattern for them all. So it just reinforces in your mind that that's what we're talking about, and they kind of stick in your head a little better. Also, rhythm, how you space things apart can make a sense of rhythm. Evenly spaced things tend to make us feel calm in our reading, whereas things that are skewed in different ways or not in a balanced sort of pattern can easily display disruption or angst or things along those lines. We think about patterns, which are really just elaborate repetitions, and they tend to be used a lot more for aesthetics or for just to consistently help people pull ideas or the ideas that are connected together. We use certain different patterns. You place things the same place on different pages or on different slides across the way to kind of drill that back into folks. And then, of course, white space, which is super important and often forgotten, particularly in presentations and particularly in just your regular old talk that ever gets done for folks. The idea of white space is crucial because it's really important for the viewer to have a break, whether you're reading something on a piece of paper or you're looking at something on a screen. Either way, the white space gives us a break, gives our eyes a break. It helps to declutter things, and it helps you to better show what it is that's most important on your page. It lets everything breathe, and it's really important to not cram every little idea that you have onto the same spot. Movement refers to how our eyes go across a page. For Western readers as we are, we read right to left. Eastern readers, right. We read left to right, right to left. And so that's important. We also tend to read in our culture from top to bottom, and left to right and top to bottom. So if you think about that when you're planning how things lie out on a page, or how you present data, a lot of times if you think about charts and you're looking at just a simple bar graph, and to line things up left to right, the most important things on the left to the right, if it's possible, if that doesn't mess up what it is you're trying to tell with your story, it helps it be a lot easier for people to read. And then variety, of course, is also important. Nothing's more boring than seeing the same thing over and over again. I don't know if other people have ever used like Survey Monkey or those online survey charts that are survey tools that automatically generate all of these tables at the end, just these charts at the end. It's easy data dump. And I don't know how many presentations I have gone through where people have just shown one slide after the other of that same chart coming out, rather than spending some time to just get to the message and make it a little better for everybody to understand. Variety is what the key to life, or whatever. There's some saying there. We use emphasis, of course, to make something stand out. You can use this. Emphasis comes apart in color, it comes apart in size. We can do that. You can make something bigger. Again, I mentioned this earlier in terms of the size of things, fine print. Again, sort of hiding the emphasis or the important parts of that. And then, of course, unity is when we bring everything all together to make it clear and concise, so that the message that you want to present is the message that comes across. So I want to now take all these principles that we went over really pretty quickly, but to just sort of think those through in a sense of doing a data visualization. And I'm not going to, I hope nobody came here today to actually learn how to do anything within Excel or R or Tableau or anything. That's a whole different class, and we're not going to do it. And it works much better when we're all sitting around together doing things rather than virtually. But I will say there are plenty of resources. I've listed some here, and I'm gonna I have some more to add, and then I'll send a pretty good bibliography as well as the slides to Emily after, so that she can distribute them to everyone, and hopefully that will be helpful for the next steps in terms of actually putting these things to practice. But when you think about data visualization in general, and you think about all the charts that are out there, this was just a really quick Google image search I did for bad charts, and it's pretty quick. They come back. There's lots of them. They're everywhere. They're all around us, and we've all been guilty of making them. So it's not like pointing fingers and laughing at other folks. Everybody makes a bad chart sometimes, and it makes perfect sense to us when we're doing it. I can interpret everything I'm doing, but then when I pass it off to somebody, they have no idea what it is I'm trying to get across. And so there are a few reasons for that. I think one, this is just an idea that I have. One of my theories is that if you use a tool like Excel, it has lots of things. The recommended charts are right there, and you have your simple little data set. In this case, it's a simple little data set. You might have not way more than that, but for these purposes, just simple little data set that I had. And you choose the recommended charts, and it throws something out, and you're like, okay, I'm done. And I just copy this and I put it right on the slide, and then it's there. And so the default makes it easy to do. And it also says it's recommended. So don't we kind of think, well, I'm not sure what I really should use here, but Excel's recommending it, so surely they know best. And so that's kind of one area. And the other sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier with that quote from Andy Kirk, that we don't know all the tools that are there, and we don't know all the charts. And so this is where we kind of need to get our skills up to date and up to speed, and to be able to do all that we want to do with that, with our charts. So, and a quick to say, you don't have to use the defaults. I'm going to show you a few things without going into a lot of detail to just clean up a very simple bar chart in no time. So here's 5 quick tips I came up with for making a better chart or a graph. It can just follow right along, and you'll be amazed how better they'll look. The first is to declutter. The second, to label directly. The third, to title effectively. The fourth, to use color wisely. And the fifth, which often gets forgotten, is if you don't need a chart or graph to make your point, then you don't need to spend the time to make one. You can just make your point in words or orally, words on a page or whatever, and you can save yourself that time that's there. So let's take a look at how this all kind of works. So the first one, and again, these are all based back on those design principles that I went over in the beginning. So it's all tied together. So the first being to declutter, right? To give that white space, get rid of the lines, get rid of get rid of the grid lines, the legends, the axis labels, those things that don't necessarily have the purpose that's needed with what the message is that you're going to say. Sometimes they do, but in a lot of cases they don't. And so to just open up that space for people makes it a lot easier for folks to just read what's going on. And in this case, the axis label being on the left, which again is the default, I'm going to show you in the next step a better way to fix that so that people don't have to constantly do that reading back and forth and back and forth. And that step is to just label directly, right? So I can get rid of that graph on or the legend on the side, the axis, and I can label directly over the bars. And this makes it's a simple little trick to do so that people there, I'm looking right away, it's 46%. When it's over on the side, I'm guessing, I don't exactly know what that is, 48, 47, whatever. If it's important, then you want to you can just put the data point right on top of it, and it makes it so much easier for folks to understand. Did I do this? The next thing, of course, is to title effectively. I like to think of titles in charts as almost the if you were putting something in a journal article and just titling them at the bottom, as we usually do, using the title space within the Excel, in this case, an Excel chart, use that in the same way. Put a statement right above your chart about what it's saying and make it very clear. Another thing that I did here on this, which I didn't really say, but I gave my bars a little bit of weight. You know, they come out so skinny in the first, and you just make them stand out in bold, and so that people can really see what it is that you're doing. But think about your chart title as like a newspaper headline or a figure label, and you want it right there, right where people can easily see the story that you're telling with the data. And then to use color wisely, I've used color two ways here. One, to high out, if I want to, in this case, I'm showing the highest percentage of reference, and it's 46%. So I made it blue. And another really simple trick to do is to use font. So my font and my title, I made the term reference all in caps to make it stand out, and I made it the same color as the bar. And so that again just reinforces, we're thinking about those design principles again. Use the color makes it stand out, gives it emphasis, it ties things together, they're connected through the color. The bolder font makes it stand out. All those little principles that we learned in the design principles that we use. And then finally, if you don't need a chart or graph, you don't really need to make one. If I had done some silly study for the stats of the library like this, and I realized that half of all the work that we do is related to answering questions for people, I didn't really need to go through that whole exercise of making a chart, right? I could have just simply said half of everything we're doing is related to reference. And if I was making a presentation, say to my library director or associate director, I could make a slide, and just to make it more interesting to look at, I could just put half of a circle there. It's certainly not accurate to 50%, but it gets the message across, right? It's plain and simple. Half of all the time, our time we're spending answering questions. That's not real data by any means. I have no idea I've never really sat down. I do have some idea, but I don't, not sure what the exact numbers, how we all break out all the work that we do. But again, the bottom line being, if you don't need to make a chart, then you just don't make one. So I want to apply these same things to, because I found this really cool little thing, that tables, because tables are another thing that we use a lot in our presentations and things. And these same principles we can apply to tables to make them better. So I'm just going to jump over to a different screen for a moment, because I found this nice spot. There's, and are you seeing something that says remove and move? Excellent. So this is a group called Dark Horse Analytics. They're up in Canada, and I just came across this really cool little slide deck that they put up to show how to do this exact same thing with data tables to do. They called it clearing off the table, which I also thought was really clever. Clear the table after supper. So the first thing that they suggest, much as in another example with a graph, was to remove the colors. So make everything black and white to just start, or in this case, a grayscale black and white. And then the next thing they suggest is to take out the grid lines, free it up, make it easier. We're decluttering. It's going back to that same principle. Get some of that stuff out of there. All the grid lines do in this particular case is make us leap over a line with our eyes every time we're reading across, and they're not really necessary. And here we remove the fills too. Again, make it clean it up, and it's easier. Now, right away you might say, but wait a minute, now it's harder to read. Sometimes the fills are important, and sometimes they are. And Edward Tufte's a big fan. If you go way back in data viz, one of the early pioneers for this, at least in our country, and since we've gotten into this with more tools that we have today, he likes to use the fills, but in this case, we're going to show you a better, sometimes it works a little better to take it out. So the fills at the top as well. Take away the border. Now it's standing out. Again, hang on, because you might be saying it's harder to read now, but we're going to show a few more tricks. So They took away the bold in that case, so you can see the titles are bolded, now they're not. Then align the text, a simple thing that we just forget, but you left align text, in this case, all of the text there. And then we right align all numbers. This is just kind of standard way of doing things. And then align your titles with your data. So for our text, they go to the left, and for our numbers, they go to the right. And then resize the columns to make them just fit better, so we can see everything. A lot of times, I don't know about you all, but I do this all the time when you download something from Excel, just so you can see what's there. You do it kind of automatically. So if you're doing it for somebody else, you would just want to do the same thing and save them the time of having to do that. Put the white space to work is their example here. So spread some things out so that everybody can have a break with their reading their eyes. And you can see these are gathered in certain categories for things. Use consistent precision. So over here, that I just made all of the, your data points are just going to the 10th. Round your numbers consistently. In this case, so we didn't need all that. Oh, round them more. In this case, they said to remove the repetition. And so it's actually going against what you can use. Well, actually using repetition by getting rid of it. Now this, as you can see, it makes it all, we can see all of these fit together. No more Calibri, they're just kind of going after that font, which is actually the font I'm using in my presentation. So there you go. And now you want to add back what you were really trying to emphasize, which was their Macho Man, Randy Savage, in red. And so the people can just see. So again, we went from that big cluttered thing to this is the end, and you title it effectively and you get right to the point of what it is. So we went from that. Let me share go to this one. Share, go back to this guy, share there. So we went from this blue kind of weird thing that you're just trying to figure and have no idea to something that was really pretty easy to see and read in no time. And that took, seriously, if you were doing that yourself, you know, it would take probably about 5 minutes to do, and you would make it so much more effective for your readers. There are a few things Emily came across chart crimes recently and shared that with me through email. There's also just a bad charts. These are from Twitter. They also go around Instagram and other places, whichever your favorite thing is. But there are also some good things on social media to follow if you're looking. Data Viz, I just wanted to point out that our UK folks do use the S rather than the Z. So if you're looking for some folks, that's a good way to do. And there are a couple of, more than a couple, but these are two that I know. Makeover Monday is a group, if you're a Tableau user, these are folks from Tableau that it started out years ago, and they would just give put a data set that they found somewhere, some neat data set out in the wild, and they would share it along with the original article or whatever the was associated with the website or article. And they encouraged people to use Tableau or use whatever they were doing to redo it. And so you had all week to do it. And then the folks who, Andy Goebel in this case, would, at the end of the week, would show what he did. They've become really elaborate over the years, and now they're like hour-long sessions that are recorded on YouTube, and you can watch how they redo things and give all the background for it. So if you really kind of got into it, you could follow along. Cole, oh golly, her name, Nussbaum, I believe, is her last name. It does this one, the storytelling with data one, and she does the same. She does a monthly practice. Here you go. Here's a data set. Have at it and see what you can do, and you could share them on Twitter. And the really nice thing about the community is that they will offer feedback for you. If you're just like, does this make sense to you, or any of those sorts of things? They're really good about sharing back. One thing I want to bring up as well is the idea of accessibility. A lot of times people think I can't do that with charts and data, but you actually can. There are a lot of resources online. I put this people and articles in data viz and accessibility as a live Google Doc that someone maintains, and it's filled with references of that you can articles and tips and tricks and tools and all kinds of things that help make not only your data visualization stuff, but just in larger principle to make things more accessible. We think about fonts, how to use fonts correctly, how to use colors correctly, labels, to make things so that they work with screen readers, and to use our alt text in our presentations, all being mindful of folks who have visual or hearing just difficulties in easily reading things that we take for granted sometimes if we don't deal with that sort of thing in our life. And then also a few tools. I'm a huge fan of Stephanie Evergreen, her Evergreen, Stephanie at evergreen.com. And she has a number of books out. If you're in Excel, if you just default to Excel, if you're not making ginormous, using big data sets and doing really sophisticated statistics, her books are really accessible, really understandable, walk right through step by step. And they're all sort of based around, she's clustered them into what kind of chart you would use to tell what kind of, get across what kind of message that you want. So I highly recommend those if you're interested. And her website in general, she writes a blog. A lot of these folks do blogging, regular blogs, regular challenges, regular sorts of things. So just, here's a trick, a new thing for this week. And it's really great. The other thing that I like that she has, one of her colleagues, Jennifer Lyons, they work together to prepare how to do charts for qualitative data, which usually we don't think of those quite as easily. And those are great. I also included here another reference guide, just some lots of good stuff pointing to all the people that can help in this area. So now I'm going to switch over to visual abstracts a little bit. I wanted to talk about that. Again, just remembering a lot of the same principles, that those design principles cover all of these sorts of things. So I want to talk about, I have my notes on two different things. So visual abstracts, we like to think are kind of trendy today. We're seeing them everywhere, but they've actually been around for a really long while, or a pretty good while. So this is the Journal of the College of Cardiology introduced what they called central illustrations all the way back in the 1980s. So they produced these for their journal publication, their print journal publication back in the 80s. And basically, they were just concise, synthesized pictures of the key concepts of an article or a section of an article or whatever, just to help people short of time get it, got it, moving on to the next thing. And they use them to this day. So they've been around, how long in the 80s, 30, 40? I don't want to think how long ago the 80s were. They were, but a while now, we know that. And basically, they just make it really easy rather than the text abstract that we're also used to. They just sort of work in conjunction with that to help people get a visual abstract of what's happening in the paper. Nature as well has been using thumbnail abstracts in their table of contents for a good, at least a decade or more. They've been there. If you happen to look at table of contents, which I don't know people's practices. I don't know faculty practices as much. I know student practices, and we should probably get them into the practice again of looking at the tables of contents of journals rather than just always seeking out a particular journal article, which is our default now, because we miss all of that, the serendipitous moments that can happen for creative ideas and good thinking when you look at things together in a group, like we used to look through journals many years ago, but we don't do that anymore. That's a whole side thing, just to throw that out. But the addition to teachers, students, or yourself to go back to noticing tables of contents are pretty good. So the Nature Chemistry says the pictorial summaries enhance the old important habit of browsing, right? So they help us to browse through, and again, to pull those ideas of disparate things together and maybe have a new idea come out of them. We talk a lot about that with translational science, right? Why they build buildings with all the different disciplines together, because maybe people will share things. And in the same way, this is kind of trying to get at that same principle. Another place that we see visual abstracts in publishing is by adding them to the sidebar. So this is from JAMA. So if you go into a JAMA article, the sidebar comes up and you can see the contents easily. You can go to the different tabs. So there's a multimedia tab and a supplemental content tab, etc. And there's, for a lot of them now, there are figures and tables, a tab. Related, you can also use these things. I was going to mention it later. I'll reinforce it later, but for your teaching and your presenting and things, when we talk about copyright, these things are accessible for you to use. I'll cut to that later. But the first thing that they're putting a lot of times now is this visual abstract that sits side by side with the text abstract to sort of, again, help people see something quicker, but also to reinforce what they're reading to make it easier for people to comprehend. And they are also using these abstracts in social media, and you can see that here where they put make it easier for other people to share them as well, either on Facebook or Twitter, to download them to use in other presentations and whatnot. The very first visual abstract that got tagged on Twitter that was under, kind of given as the first time it was ever done, was from the Annals of Surgery back in 2016. That's kind of the little reference point most people say. And this was what they published, just a very brief thing from this article, all that came out in July of 2016. And you can see they posted it, and it's both a marketing thing for them as well as a way to disseminate science. So if you're on social media, you will see things like this. You can also download these, as I said, and they're really handy if you were going to do perhaps a journal club or something you wanted to talk more specifically about an article. These are always great touch points to sort of use in those kind of gatherings and in those sort of instruction. So what is a visual abstract? Well, simply put, it's just a visual summary of what's covered in a paper. And I'm showing lots of different examples. It was pretty easy to find many of them. And there've been some studies done to show that the effectiveness or the benefits of using visual abstracts. In this particular study by West et al. Found that articles using visual abstracts prompted readers to look at them twice as often as they did articles that didn't. So we're drawn to them naturally. It's a time thing. It's just a visual aesthetic thing, a curiosity thing, however our minds work, that we're drawn to them, and they're certainly worth the effort. Small sample size here, but they're going in the right direction in terms of why you would want to think about creating them. So here's a resource from Elsevier, which is a giant in the publishing industry, as you might know, but they offer these tips for creating good visual abstracts that they then use themselves and when they are creating them for authors. So reading left to right, you start by introducing your key point. I like the little chicken and egg there. The key point or concept that you're getting off. Then you follow that with a visual explaining your methodology and what happened or how you did what you did. And then you finish up with the main outcome. Of course, that's like always the cut and dry, the bottom line, what people want to know, right? So the key is to keep it simple and to keep it connected so that the visual flows in the same manner. The visual, we're used to have a textual abstract, and it flows from this section of this section to this section. These need to standardize, kind of go in the same way, so that it reinforces how we'll come to understand these in the same manner. And if you look at the different components look at it a little bit more closely, and you can see this comes from the Annals of Surgery, and this is how they like to present them. So they have the title that summarizes the research question you you addressed, again, going back to how we thought about the titles in charts and graphs. The body is all about the outcomes, and that's the most important thing that they want to get out. It's stated in words. It's also stated in the visuals, so it's reiterated that way, and then summarized with the findings of the data. So it's standard citation information is also always included, so that you have, who created the visual itself. And many publishers do offer this. I did do some digging to see, do you have to create these yourselves or do publishers do them? A lot of publishers will offer it as a service, and others will allow you to create your own. Some tools if you're not sure what to use, where you even get started. PowerPoint is those abstract things done there are basically done in a PowerPoint thing. It's pretty simple, all the ones that I've shown so far. And the same in a Keynote, if you happen to be a Mac user that uses Keynote. Canva is a online Canva. Mind the Graph and Inkscape are all online, just website type places. There's always a free version, and then there's a paid version that opens up a few more things for you, but they're pretty easy to use and help do a lot of that basic design stuff without you having to think about it too much. Our IT, we do have a subscription here to BioRender, which is a amazing product to really draw scientific images and things, and a lot of just nice graphics. So if you're doing really scientific presentations, you probably know of BioRender, or if you're interested, you can contact IT and they can tell you more about that. And then of course, the Cadillac of all graphic designers is Adobe Illustrator. And I always think of Illustrator as, my brain, I use this much of it because there's so much that can go, that it can do, but it's also available. You can purchase site licenses to Adobe Illustrator through IT. And then a lot of people, this is a question we get a lot in the library, so I just thought I'd throw a few things out there, and it's about where do I find images and graphics to use. The Noun Project is one of my favorite places to go for icons and graphs. If you don't know about it, you can download anything for free. You can use everything there for free. As long as you cite the source. You can also be a supporter of them. And I can't remember, I happen to be a supporter because I just think it's a great little site that it's almost like a crowdsourced sort of thing amongst graphic designers to share things. And if you pay an annual subscription, you don't have to do all the citing of things at the bottom. Google Image Search, of course, is out there and easy to do. I mentioned earlier, I wanted to talk about subscription-based resources. A lot of the journals that we do subscribe to and you have access to through the university, within our licenses, a lot of that stuff is available for you to download and use in your presentations. You don't have to recreate things. It's just important to cite the sources, and they're usually right there. The wording is often given to you pretty straight away, but a lot of the resources that we have, imaging things and diagnosis things and all that sort of stuff, have these features now. And so if you're ever curious about what might be there, feel free to reach out at any time. Social sharing sites are good for photographs, Pixabay and things like that, where people share things and they put Creative Commons licenses or things like that on them so that people can use them. And then of course, you could always default to take the picture yourself or make the graphic yourself. It's not that hard to do really simple things with the tools that we have, and then you know that you're not violating anyone's copyright because you hold the copyright yourself. You did it on your own. And then just like anything else, this is a little card I have down at my studio downstairs here at my house. I do art at home and I play music at home, things like that. And I have this little card that reminds me that we always say practice makes perfect, but practice actually just takes a lot of practice to remember to do it. So like with all of these things, making charts and graphs and visual abstracts, it just takes practice to do it, to work on ways to do it. I suggested some of the things on social media. If you're into charts, they're here's your data set to play with for a month and see if you can come up with something fun and share it and get some feedback. You can also find an article, get one of your own articles and just practice again, making a visual abstract out of it, share it with your peers, get some feedback. I think that's really great. Create your layout, add your citation, all those sorts of things. And then share them. I did find, I put it in the references, I think BU's med school has a really nice, just some templates to follow along for doing abstracts, visual abstracts as well. And they weren't the only place. There's some other templates if you're just like, I just want to know how these things fit on the page in a standard way, and you can find them pretty easily. And then a couple of things that I found that were really interesting. One, a couple of articles that talked about just science and social media, which I think were really interesting, and in particular, how graphs or how these visual abstracts or how all kinds of charts and graphs get created quickly and disseminated quickly and then used incorrectly a lot of times. And just some nice pieces there, one from Science and one from MIT's News about just good practices to think about as you're creating these and sharing them and disseminating your science with these new formats. Other places that we've seen them, of course, again, are science conferences and academic meetings. We've long done posters and things at meetings, but it's been interesting. And I was thinking of doing this. I'm doing a poster with some colleagues for the Medical Library Association's annual meeting in May. And I thought it might be kind of cool to make our own small little visual abstract to share on social media, because social media becomes big during the conference, and as a way to kind of promote it and get people up. Oh, I saw a chat. Oh, I will talk. I'll address that. Oops, it's in the community chat. And then another really interesting thing that I came across was were journal clubs that are using these, and really one that's jumped right out was the nephrology journal. The nephrology journal club is a great example of how visual abstracts are being used to make online discussions more appealing. So the pattern that they developed, and I'm not sure if I wrote down the date of when they started these, but it's been a few years now. So they introduce on the user website to introduce the topic via a blog post. And then there's a patient essay that accompanies it. And then if somebody creates a visual abstract, and then they set a date and a time where there's an online Twitter chat about this. And all of these things are then compiled. And then after that, they do a summary discussion of or summary of the discussion that happened on social media. And then they put it to the website. So you had this nice condensed lesson on this particular article using all these other means of discussion or all these other means of learning and educating one another, which I thought was really just kind of a cool thing. It's surely a bit of work, but I think that there's a community, at least within this group, that's really committed to it and has found it very effective for what they're doing. So they're going forward with it. And then a few thoughts that have come up about these that I think are somewhat interesting. Should the visual abstract be part of the journal article or something separate? So we've in the JAMA example, they had it as a sidebar thing. You could share it out, but can it stand alone, or should it always point back to the article? Is an interesting question to think about. In terms of creating the visual abstract, if you did it yourself, well, then and you wrote the article and you did the abstract, and so it's all nice and neat and tidy. But if a publisher does it for you, then who owns that abstract of your work? Who did that illustration of your work, and who gets credit for it? Just things to think about there. And how do they get credit for it? That sort of thing. Should they be required of authors when submitting for publication? I don't see this happening, but some journals may really go that way. And then another interesting place of should there be a central repository for collecting them? But again, that would sort of takes to the first question of there's standalone articles, but they have a lot of value to them. And it would be nice to have a way to find them easily and collect them rather than just doing a Google search or just looking through journals for them. As it is, they're not I haven't found them indexed in a way within a journal to show if you're on a journal site to find them yet. That might be something that publishers would look to in the future to make them easy, more findable, easier to search for. And then there's some references, and again, I'll add some more to those. I've got some more to put in there, and I did want to leave a few minutes for. We've got a couple minutes for discussion. I do have a couple of questions here. Wanted to learn more. Do we do students we do a lot. In terms of learning more, yes. I'm happy to always sit and have people come to the library, set up one-on-one sessions, or if you have a small group of people, please do reach out. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd be your contact person, and I can kind of arrange that. Poster sessions there. We do the same. Someone asked that question is asked about are there specific advice about the balance or best practices on making posters? Yes, there are, and we actually have a guide on the library's website, which I will make a note to include in the references, so that can point you to some information there in terms of posters. And we also have one librarian in particular is really good at doing posters. And if you're ever kind of stuck and you just want another set of eyeballs, we're always happy to look at things and share our thoughts and opinions and advice. So don't forget to reach out.
All right, we do have a couple more minutes. If somebody wants to, probably best to raise your virtual hand and we can take a few questions.
I do know with I'll reiterate, I mentioned it, but in terms of people often have questions around, oh, you're welcome, Mary, around when you're presenting posters, what you can use and not. The copyright comes up there. A lot of times we get questions on copyright. Again, feel free to reach out to me. That on teaching materials as well. I'm happy to help with all that stuff. Good. All right.
Thank you so much, Sally. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure.
I think this was an incredibly interesting and really practical session. So
yeah, tip of the iceberg. There's so much to it, but I hope it at least got people piqued your interest enough to get some basics to get started.
I know I wrote down 2 authors with their books, a website, the Noun Project. So
yeah, and I will. I'll send you I'll send you an annotated bibliography that you may share with everyone.
All right, awesome. Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Have a great afternoon.
Did you, Emily, did you happen to see how many people we had? I just wanted to...
Yes, and Peggy is taking attendance, and we have an evaluation that's going to go out. So hopefully everybody will fill out that evaluation. We'll get you all that information.
Thanks very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.